Welcome to this webinar sponsored by Women Who Code Python. Women Who Code Python is a track community of women who code, and our mission is that we are a global nonprofit dedicated to inspiring women to excel in technology careers. We have 4 main goals. We want to empower women with the skills needed for professional achievement, educate companies to better promote, retain, and hire talented women, build a global community where networking and mentorship is valued, and develop role models and support this generation of engineers. And not just engineers, but all women who work in engineering, technical, and STEM-related fields. We have a code of conduct for all of our events, in person and online. We're an inclusive community. We're dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community, and that is regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, socioeconomic status, caste, creed, political affiliation, or even your preferred programming language. Although this is about Python, so you might get sick of us talking about Python because we love it. Our events are intended to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and anyone who is there for this purpose is welcome. We don't tolerate harassment of members in any form, and our code of conduct applies to all of our events. You can read more details, or if you need to report an incident, it can be done there at that URL. We have 6 track communities: front-end, blockchain, Python, mobile, cloud, and data science. And none of this would be possible without our sponsors. So a big thank you to them. That's McKinsey & Company, the Home Depot, Atlassian, and the Python Software Foundation. And welcome to Programmability Enablement. Let's collaborate, a tech talk by Madeline. And here is a little bit about our fabulous talk author. And with this, I think I'm going to switch over and let you do the driving, Madeline.
Alrighty, thank you.
You're welcome. There we be.
All right, so let me see if I could share mine. Do you see my screen?
Fabulous, yes.
All right. Well, as I noted on the comments, I'm not testing you at all. So there's not any coding specifically. So we just want to make sure that we cover the business side, what the holistic picture is when it comes to programmability. So my intention is just to enable you, make you aware, and hopefully have some fun conversations on this show. The agenda is finding use cases, be curious, be bold, and have fun. Fundamentals, support groups, one-on-one sessions, and leadership responsibilities. At the end, you're going to ask questions or ask during different slides that I cover. As I said before, I definitely want to focus on engaging you, making sure that you're speaking. If you want to send it on the Q&A and ask the questions, or in the chat, or verbally speak to us, let us know. Let's move to the next slide. All right, so that's some of the questions that typically beginners have. So how to get started. So that's always been a conundrum for many of the engineers that I work with. I have 10 engineers that report to me. I manage them and try to enable them. I don't like to micromanage. So my intention is to make sure that not only do they have the technical skills to be able to be placed in different projects, but also the capacity and the knowledge to be able to understand what the needs are. I usually start with, how do you do your work, right? I know that's very overwhelming to learn new languages, especially Python, between Java, CSS, you can go on and on. But one of the first steps that you want to try to do is, before you even start to build something, try to make a plan, right? Look at what you're doing. Simple things as Excel, for example. Excel has its own macros, formulas you can use. I actually support one of my project managers. She's not a savvy in automation, but she does send me use cases on how to, let's say, query or collect information regarding servers, for example. She wants to sort it. She wants to know how to pull data from different sheets, from different workbooks. Those simple tasks are some things that you can help when it comes to basic Excel. But again, also working with APIs. There's many different types, right? You want to read documentation for it, and depending on what it is that you're integrating with, whether it's a web application, a local application on a server, appliance, Windows, whatnot, different operating systems, or even containers, you have to understand the different documentations. But what I typically ask my engineers is, what are some things that are very repetitive that you feel that you need to automate? For example, collecting user information. I focus on collaboration. I integrate with Cisco UC solutions. So my engineers typically have to do a discovery as part of the project. We interview the IT department. It could be the business units, whether it's HR, marketing, call centers, you name it. So typically we have to have a workbook with certain specific data provided, whether it's username, user IDs, first name, last name, extensions, anything that pertains to us to bulk importing configurations to a system. So that can be repetitive depending on what you're doing. We also have to understand the design based on the application we're using, and that's the specific to vendors, right? So we're integrators. Even having a collection of server information, just knowing how to store that, how to create that so that we could put into a design document, and then creating config files or batch files to help us import that in the system. Those are small tasks that you want to go through. That's not always the easiest when it comes to manually processing it, right? So those things are repetitive, we want to ask. What is the problem that you're trying to solve and the outcome that you want? Are you looking for expediency, accuracy? Is there a time deadline that you need to meet? How cost effective is it? If we complete and create an automation process for a system, does it benefit us not only in time, but also quality? So I remind my engineers that if you get more savvy in automation, not only are you efficient and more accurate, you also have less headaches in troubleshooting, right? Making sure that you do it right the first time is important. And also you get additional things like life balance. I don't want my engineers to get burnt out. We assign them to multiple projects. Some of them have to travel, whether it's local, international, you name it. So I want to make sure that they're maintaining the balance of life that they require. We work crazy hours. We're usually working at night when everybody else is sleeping. We can't make changes or migrations during the day because we don't want to interrupt the business. So the goal is to make sure that when we automate processes, we're thinking about not only the technical reasons, not only the work reasons, but also to make sure that you're supporting the life that you have, your lifestyle, your personal life, right? Whether you're supporting a family or you're just trying to find me time or trying to do hobbies or even side jobs that you might have that you're trying to work on. That's some of the topics that I wanted to discuss on this. Any questions, concerns on that specific slide, listing the reasons why we want to cover this before building, programming, or processes? Okay. And be curious and be bold, and most of all, have fun. So I do have Wonder Woman in the background. I also have that as part of the logo. I do believe in changing the mindsets that you have. It's not always about the technical piece of it, right? To be able to build software or even integrate, it creates results through creativity. It's just another form of art. It's just more technical. You could be a web developer designing just the front end of it. You can also be the middle, understand the middle side of it and the back end side. Depending on what you know and what your experiences are, you realize that there's always constant changes. There's always a lot to learn. It can be overwhelming, but what I've been telling my engineers is that the technology nowadays it's morphing to a different level now, right? It's becoming a commodity. What we used to do as network engineers is no longer flies. We have to understand customization now. We have to work with cloud services nowadays, whether it's AWS for storing, even Ring Central. You can say Twilio. There's a lot of different services out there that require cloud, whether it's Azure for servers, any data center related cloud hosting services. Most clients nowadays are moving from on-premise hardware setups to saying, hey, I want to lease or rent equipment. They no longer want to support the hardware themselves. So there's a lot of cloud first initiative out there. And we do need to be able to understand that. How do we automate the process for migration? For example, one of the clients that I have, it's a park, and they have at least 80,000 endpoints. But how do you move different endpoints from on-premise to a cloud service. So different collections are needed, right? We need to make sure that we are storing them in secure locations. We need to understand how connections are happening between the different systems, what bandwidths we need to consider, what service providers we need to make sure that we understand, whether it's for SD-WAN or internet service providers. So those are things that we are constantly being challenged to design, troubleshoot, and support. So mindset that I want to make sure we get comfortable with, or at least uncomfortable, is not getting used to being in a status quo. Nothing ever stays the same. It does take 5 to 10 years on average, from what I've seen, when technologies are changing. Usually, if you're starting at 5 years or even 2 years, that's considered bleeding edge. But once it matures, it tends to be about 5 to 10, even 15 years. So it's part of our normal process. The other piece is volunteer to take initiative to try something new that somebody else hasn't done. I don't assume that I know everything, but I do volunteer to do a lot of things. Whether I know everything or not, it does not matter. The important piece is that you're curious. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is to find people that have initiative. That's probably one of the most difficult challenges that many leadership, even in the C-levels, have. If you have the blend of not only the technical, but the business acumen, and you understand how to communicate and translate technical to business, and then create outcomes for it that result in a market need, then you have a very good skill to have. Also confidence, right? That's part of the problem that I have to deal with as an engineer and manager, is how to hire engineers or resources that know how to present themselves in front of my clients. The first meeting that you have with my client is your first interview. They test you to see if you can handle responding to the queries that they have, maybe direct, personal, professional. They consider us an advisor. So when we are doing introductions, whether kicking off a project, they expect you to be the expert, but also as a trusted advisor. And you don't gain experience by not starting at all. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Really, there is no stupid question. You need to read, obviously, search as often as you can. There's different knowledge bases for different tools. Use them, use your collaborative tools. There's Microsoft Teams, there's Slack, there's WebEx Teams. Use those, right? You really do need to learn how to experiment and try to move on. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, at least especially in the lab. When we integrate systems, we cannot afford to make large mistakes on a data center or something that's production, obviously. And when you're doing software or creating software, it is truly important to test it. Even for us, when we don't even create software at work, even just testing the integration is important. You cannot underestimate the value of spending quality time and making sure that if you have a test plan, that you follow through with it. And if you have one, there's sign off. Obviously, when you create software, it's a little bit different, but I just want to stress how important that is, that even with mistakes, you can prevent a lot of it if you test that often. What do you think, Bethany? Everybody still hearing me?
We're hearing you great.
All right. Awesome. So the next piece is the fundamentals, right? We don't really move from 0 to 200 miles an hour without starting with the basics. From my experience, I've found that this book is very useful, Python Crash Course. I actually did a weekly session with my own team, with collaboration engineers, secure network engineers, data center engineers, and wireless engineers. I did not assume that they know how to code. And this was the perfect book for that. It actually was accurate 100%. It was very easy to follow. And what I liked about it is the definition, the explanation line by line is in each chapter. And in the end of each chapter, it gave you different questions and challenges that you could solve for. And one of the things I liked about it too is that it talks about PEP 8. It's a standard on how to code, right? Some best practices, some syntax that you need to know. It's interesting that I found that there are many different programmers out there that, taught themselves to code, but never really took the time to learn about PEP 8 or the different standards so that you can have proper naming convention and how to structure your code, right? You want to know simple code, how to create functions, how to create classes, how do you make it easy and reusable and clean and much more readable so that if you are going back to your code, you understand it. And if somebody else is using your code, they can make it reusable and readable and easier to troubleshoot. So this is some basics that I would recommend. I know many people struggle where to start. Udemy is another great source, but it takes patience and time for you to actually follow through. The videos are very useful. It just depends on your time and basically your commitment. What I've found is that for my team, for example, I had my engineers do one-on-one coding with me. And for one of them, it took at least 3 to 4 months for him to at least get comfortable. And that was regular 3 times a week for 30 minutes with me for about 4 months straight. So that was quite a bit of commitment on my side to do one-on-one with him, goes from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 10, and then create a code that we could use for our projects. So it takes time and commitment. If you have bootcamp and you have the lifestyle that supports you studying back to back and you're able to do it, more power for you. But for the ones that are already working and they're changing their skill set from just, from engineering or a different career for that matter, it's quite a struggle for us to just jump into coding, right? Any questions in the book?
I don't have any questions, but I have a couple comments. One, I also think this Python Crash Course book is excellent for another reason that you haven't stated, which is that in learning things like PEP 8, it helps to have concrete examples or projects to work on. And the second half of this book does exactly that. It takes you through different projects in different domains. And I know a lot of people right now are very, very interested in data science and want to get involved in that and want to do that. And the libraries and the examples and the tutorials for data science are all very focused on things like Jupyter notebooks. And they are not focused on naming your variables in a way that you can read them later and doing things like that. And so what's great about this book is that there is a data science project in here, and he takes you through how to do that and how to make that a full project instead of a kind of disconnected Jupyter notebook. So that's a great thing. And another thing about learning, I have found that people often will jump into either tutorials or classes or videos without sitting themselves down and asking themselves how they learn. And if you're not clear on how you learn, you can make yourself really frustrated and make things much more difficult for yourself, because you'll continue to do the class or you'll continue to try to plod through the exercises, and you won't think to yourself, well, maybe I need to pair with someone, or maybe I'll try reading instead of watching a video. That's the other thing I would counsel people is, like, if something's not working for you, don't assume it's you, assume that it's the material and go look for another strategy. And don't give up because you're struggling. It may very well be that you just can't take information in a video, or that you need to be in a classroom setting, or you need to not be in a classroom setting. I know for myself, like, many people do really well pair programming. I don't, and I absolutely know that, and so I know not to do that. And so that can really help as well.
Agreed. Right on topic too, because we have the support group, right? So not only joining women who code Python, right? There's GitHub, Gitlab, Stack Overflow. There's so many different resources. I've been giving you a lot of examples of what I've done successfully with my team. We've been doing it for about a year. I actually had to create separate groups, one for the women's study group, and also for really the general public, right, nationally. So we have at least over 2,000 employees. I work specifically in consulting. So I've actually evangelized it internally. As a manager, it helps to support employees, right? To give them the time and make the time to do this. It's not easy to continuously and routinely do something like this. You have to give a lot and you really have to care. Group sessions are good to see different techniques. So I've done showcasing from different people that have attended the classes to show me what they've learned. And also it's a part of being of their pride, right? I wanted to make sure that I recognize the ones that have been able to create code that not only helps them be efficient, but also showcases so they can share with everybody else. The ones that I've liked attending before in the past is hackathons, right? Attending hackathons are a good way to get introduced to programming and really any technology. You get to work with different groups. Even if you don't know it all, there's other people that are already familiar with it and you pick up from them and you learn from them. And the fun part is when your group does win, you might win different raffles or different, awards that you might get from playing, or attending those, right? Cisco DevNet is another company that has been focused on enabling more network engineers or software developers. It's openly being done. They actually have a Cisco DevNet Create that I'm attending in March. I attended that last year. You get awards, you get to meet other people, they have sessions, they have other coders that are out there sharing the tools that they use from scratch and then developing it and publicly sharing it openly as a shared community. Another thing that you want to try to do is code with friends and family, right? You can have it done at home, you can tinker, you can even play with Raspberry Pi if you want to. You can even have the kids play on with it. There's there's different things for Legos that you can play with as well. Module types of coding to start with. So there's different ways to do it. And as Bethany said, it depends on you, the style of learning that you want. Sometimes you need another one with you, watching you, not necessarily coding with you, but just being a second set of eyes. I've actually found that useful when you're struggling under coding and you've been stuck looking at the screen for hours, if not days, and then you find out somebody else looks behind you and they say, oh, you missed a comma, colon. Is that the variable that you were looking for? Are you sure that's the right one that you're trying to reference? Is that the right function? Is that the right parameter? So sometimes it's nice to have somebody else look at it that can give you a fresh set of eyes, right? I have another lady that I do one-on-one. I started again. We do that twice a week. We spend 30 minutes again, and we look at the different API documentation. I just see what she's looking to build, and I help out with that. And sometimes it takes us a few minutes to solve. Sometimes it takes us the next day to solve it together. It really is helpful to have a continuous feedback, and it could be from anyone. And the one-on-one sessions, like I mentioned before, it's important. I think for the ones that require it, the reason why I definitely promote it is part of its accountability. I don't know too many people that I know that if they don't have an accountability partner, they tend to skip, they neglect it, right? If it's in their calendar, they're more likely to spend the time, 15, 30 minutes more regularly than they do it by themselves. I don't do this only for coding. I also do this for other support groups from Lean, for example. I have leaders that I support internationally in India, Germany, UK, you name it, different time zones. And we do meetups maybe bi-weekly or even once a month. So having that accountability buddy, whether it's a group of 5 people or 2 people, makes a difference. Share your enthusiasm too. Evangelize this. I know it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of bravery to be able to put yourself in front and be vulnerable. But I would say if you start it and you enjoy teaching, it's very rewarding. What we do today, especially with Women Who Code, is really a blessing, right? This is something that we enjoy. We like to share it. We spend our personal time sharing with the rest of the world to make sure that the enthusiasm is there so that you can continue to learn. And experiment with coding. It's not a strict science. Sometimes, there's different structures. You need to know that. But you can play. You can do this on the laptop. Depending on what you do, you can put it on AWS, Python Anywhere. So there's many cloud services, even Heroku. That's another one. You can try hosting it in there. Just consider security and access, right? You just got to understand where the data is being stored. So understand not only coding, but where you place your code, and make sure that you're not just creating open code that will create vulnerability. And also pick your IDE. I know Bethany talked about Juniper Notebook. I know Anaconda has that built in. And if you took Udemy classes, they use Anaconda with Jupyter. I like Jupyter only for a few lines of codes, but what I prefer is PyCharm or Visual Studio Code. The reason why I like PyCharm is because it's easy. You have the PEP 8 already included. So if you don't understand that fully, PyCharm highlights that. It has like a question mark or light bulb that shows you, okay, these are some improvements that you need to do when you're coding, whether it's to limit the lines or characters and per line, or even the indentation. Since I know PyCharm is very picky about indentation, PyCharm helps you with that. Visual Studio is also helpful. If you like to use GitHub or Gitlab, you can upload the to your repository much more quickly if you have the IDE. Anything else you want to add, Bethany?
I would just want to add a couple things. One, a PyCharm. PyCharm is spendy. I'm not going to lie. There is a community edition, but it is crippled. If you do end up paying for a full version of PyCharm, there is a PyCharm, I don't know if it's called Student Edition. I'll have to look it up. Maybe it's called Education Edition.
I think
but it actually has lessons built into the IDE for you to practice your Python, which I think is very cool. The other thing that a paid version of PyCharm will get you is built-in Docker container management. So that you don't have to go out to the command line to run Docker containers. You can run them from the IDE, and you can also, with the professional version, you can also connect to databases and do Django and React development, and do it all in one IDE without switching. You can also do all of that in Visual Studio Code, although it takes a little more digging because you have to hunt down the plugins that make that work for Visual Studio Code. But unlike PyCharm, Visual Studio Code is free, which is pretty awesome. And it, like Maybelline said, it has lots of hooks for committing code to GitHub or to GitLab. It has hooks for connecting up to databases, so you can run SQL queries right from the IDE, and you don't have to go out to the command line to log into the database and run queries. For if you're programming Go or other languages that are more compiled than Python is, Java, for instance, where you have a two-step compile process, you can hook all of those tools up to Visual Studio Code so that they run automatically, so that when you press save, it'll compile your code for you, which is very cool. For Anaconda, there is, in addition to Jupyter and Jupyter Labs, Anaconda comes with an IDE called Spider. And Spider is, it's a little rough around the edges. It's an open source project. It's constantly evolving. But one of the very cool things about Spider that PyCharm is particularly bad at, and I'm a little annoyed with PyCharm because, again, you pay for PyCharm. And with all that money, they still can't seem to get it right. Spider is very, very good if you are doing graphing or other exploratory data analysis and you don't want to fire up a Jupyter notebook. You can do much of that exploratory data analysis right in Spider, and it has an integrated graph. So it acts a lot like RStudio, if any of you have used the R programming language in RStudio. And so that's pretty cool. And it comes with, when you download the Anaconda distribution, you end up with both Jupyter Notebooks /Labs and Spider. So.
Yeah, that's built in. And I think another one I forgot to add here is Postman. So that one is very useful. I found that very helpful because you're able to test and connect to the different web services, right? Understand the header, the content, the authentication type. And the cool part that I like about Postman is that you can save the different queries that you have, right? Especially for JSON requests, anything like that. And you can create different sample scripts in different languages. So if you run a query there's an option where you can change the language to either Python, C, or whatever, and it gives you the sample code that you might need to connect to the web services.
Postman is indispensable. I actually have Postman up right now on another screen. I have been working on an API that's built in Django, Django DRF. And sure, I could use curl, I could use a whole bunch of things to mimic an API call, but Postman makes it super, super easy to not only pull up the last call I made as I changed the API, but allow me to test things like token authentication and expirations, and when a permission, when I have permissions around get but not around post, all of that. Yeah, it's an excellent tool.
Yeah, you definitely can't go without it. I mean, even some of the applications we use for Cisco, for example, for the WebEx on-premise or one of the video servers that we have, they don't have a fully baked GUI, right? And the only way for us to make any changes, even AD integration for Active Directory and directory itself, is to use Postman. So we have to have a sample like package scripts that they gave us so that we can make the changes. That's how much of how raw that application is. So Postman is very effective for a lot of things, that's for sure.
And it's pretty cushy, because if any of you have had to use curl, it's kind of like using VI. And yes, some people love using VI, but oh, give me a lovely slick GUI where I can just interrogate the object I get back and get all the information lined up nice and neat. Yeah. Oh, and as Kevin pointed out, there's also Postwoman as well as Postman. Postwoman is an open source project. It's online only, unfortunately. I slightly prefer Postman for that reason, because I can have a client, even though it's a client that still connects to the web. It's a client on my desktop, whereas Postwoman, I think you run it in a browser. But yes, there is Postwoman now.
It's almost like couldn't they just make it Post People instead of Postman and Postwoman?
Or maybe just
Post?
Post. Exactly. I don't know.
They have to distinguish it as a gender. I don't understand. But yeah, that's an indispensable tool among others. But those are the common ones that I think many programmers already know or are aware of. So, all right. So we'll get to the last slide and then Q&A, and definitely see if there's any questions or comments. So this is a slide that I leave in here. It's important, I believe, especially in many companies nowadays, moving forward with AI and automation. There's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of market interruptions out there. And for many people, how does that impact our jobs, right? Especially if you're starting out, you don't really have a full background in programming. What is the expectation, right? What's the vision for programmability? Our CIO and CTOs have been very clear about their messaging on why automation is important. It's not only because we're integrators, but it's also to create efficiencies at work, to give our teams and employees the capability to not only understand their core practice knowledge, but also to evolve from it so they can stay challenged. Many engineers are great out there, like to learn and love challenge, right? They want to experiment, they want to do new things. They get bored easily, right? So we want to make sure that there's a constant pipeline of new things that they can learn and adopt and apply in real projects. Shark tanks and recognition. We definitely encourage this at work, for at least for my company. This is our way to motivate employees to be creative and to showcase the products that they do, whether it's internal tools that they're building out or custom integrations that we give and provide to our clients. So it's important to recognize the people that are spending the extra time, sleepless nights, the midnight candles, right? And giving them the recognition, whether it's a title. There's a lot, you're gonna see a lot more of this, distinguished engineers. That's a rare breed. It's not something that everyone gets. It definitely takes a lot of initiative and basically people that are good leaders. They evangelize the technology. They're out there seeking ways to build the company or grow the company. Those are the people that would get recognized. And because we are building software from pretty much from scratch and anywhere, right? Data privacy and cybersecurity is important. There's a growing trend and market when it comes to cybersecurity. This is a hot topic and it's definitely a concern because a lot more devices are connected in the internet. And everybody knows here that there is no data that's free. If you sign up for a free application, your data will be sold in some way or form. Whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, that's something that we all need to understand. How do they market and use that data that we share publicly, right? So we need to make sure that we educate others as much as we can, especially our children, the young, even the adults, our more senior, mature audiences, even my own parents. There's a lot of common schemes for scams, right? Whether it's through emails, clickbaits, or even calling or automation. What's more scarier nowadays, it's that the technologies have advanced so well that even calling, cold calling, has become a little challenging. They have AI now where the annunciator or the speaker is a machine and sounds like a real person. And it's very easy to scam people if they don't pay attention. Understanding what the partners' role are and the vendors. I know that depending on your experience, you might have exposure to this, but it's really valuable if you know how to navigate through this. Understanding who are the technology innovators out there, where do you want to go? If you're starting to build your own business, what are the things that are going to make you successful in branding you as a resource or as a freelance or even somebody that supports other companies as a contractor or working in a company, whether in the US or globally. Understand the team and business needs. It's very much moving rapidly. It feels like everybody's learning on the fly. So don't feel like you're the only one that's struggling to keep up. Even the leaders and the C-levels are also trying to figure out how do they move forward? How do they elevate the employees and take advantage of the capacities and talents that people have? And another one that seems to be a difficult topic for some companies or even organizations in general is how do you invest in employees? As you heard me say earlier, I do spend almost 90, if not 100% of my time enabling my team. And what it takes is me going deep, learning it, even if I don't know it. I know enough to be dangerous, right? I've been around for a while, I've been consulting for a long time. I was a senior engineer for a long time, but it takes true, honest, genuine, care to actually want to invest time and want to support your employees. We have to have more leaders that are mentored and taught how to lead. It's not easy. My mission is trying to help managers not to just be managers. Just because somebody's skilled or proficient in a job and excellent at being, an engineer or whatever skill they have doesn't mean they're the best managers out there. So everyone needs mentors. And hopefully, if you haven't heard it already over and over, I believe in sharing and teaching. It's not easy to be a leader. They make challenging choices and decisions to make to support a team. Another thing that keeps coming up for us, at least for my consulting firm and really any environment, is user adoption strategies, right? For a long time, a lot of the projects are based from initiatives from CIOs to CTOs saying, hey, I want some technology, and they ask the IT department to deploy it, right? Doesn't mean it's business sound because they didn't really do the diligence to capture or interview the actual needs. So it's important that adoption strategies are created so that you can capture really what the outcomes are. For example, how do you save money? How do you save time by not traveling so much? How do you enable employees to work from home and not have to travel or commute? So there's different outcomes that you have to think about. Diversity and inclusion leaders, that's important as well. I think that if we think this holistically, that means we care. We're able to invest more time, not only to give you the tool sets to learn the skill and your core, but also to give you the life balance that you need. And I believe that's important. Anything to add, Bethany?
Not at the moment. Oh, that's an excellent book.
Yep. Yeah, so this is one of my favorite books right here, The Project Phoenix. If you haven't already read this book, I highly encourage you to. It's you can think of it as a half fiction and half real, right? So fable, but they did a very good job of creating a story that talks basically from bottom up, knowing the business structure as a director, as an IT manager, as being an SME, as well as being the executive that's trying to move a company forward. So the premise is the company is failing, and one of the main characters' job is to successfully deploy this project called Project Phoenix, or Phoenix Project. It's a software, I think it's for point of sale, right? That's the kind of application they were trying to deploy. I can't recall what software they were building.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But the whole company's riding on it, hence the Phoenix portion of this. Yeah.
So, and then they cover, I think, the whole project life cycle, right? Understanding constraints. How do you remove bottlenecks? How do you use the Kanban board, meaning how to prioritize, right? Instead of always fighting with fire all the time, how do you change process and remove the ones you don't need anymore so that you can create a process of going from end to the end, right? So inventory, knowing how to process that. The one that I've recently found out was Talk Python. That's a new one. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, Bethany. That's a podcast that talks all about.
I have the Talk Python podcast is really cool, and the two hosts, one of them has a testing focus. In fact, he's all about the PyTest and all about different libraries and packages. And yeah, I like that podcast a lot. There's that one, and those two same hosts, if I'm remembering correctly, also do a short podcast that's like news about the world of Python every week. So Talk Python is more in depth, and then the other one is, I think it's called Python Bytes. Maybe not. Now I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah, there was
Python. But both of the hosts also have their own training and consulting companies. One's more testing focused and one's more dev focused, although they're both senior developers. And so they bring some interesting perspectives into the whole thing. But yeah, so they actually have the Talk Python training. I have not sampled any of that, but that's pretty cool. And then shoot, why am I not finding? Oh, and PyCharm is one of their sponsors.
It looks like Kevin said PyBytes.
PyBytes, that's what it is. Python Bytes podcast.
Yeah.
That's the one. And that one I like to listen to when I don't like the longer one, Talk Python podcast, oftentimes has interviews or very kind of in-depth kind of digging into things, which can be distracting if I'm coding or working on something else. But the Python Bytes is kind of short and sweet and about kind of the interesting things that have come up for the week. So I like to listen to that one while I'm doing stuff that's requires my attention, but I can still listen.
Yeah, definitely been finding. I think there's some for newbie code. I can't remember. There's a couple. Code Blocks is another one, I believe. There's a podcast out there as well.
Yeah, and then let me I'm pulling up my podcast app right now. I have a few too many podcasts.
Yeah.
There's one other Python podcast that I like to listen to that I'm trying to. Is it called Import This? It might be called Import This. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm checking that one. I know Code Newbies one. And
Import This, which is hosted by Kenneth Wrights, although it may have been, it looks like this one might be defunct because Kenneth has kind of stepped back from a lot of the work that he was doing. So that may not be a current one anymore. It looks like the last episode I have of that one is from April of last year. See what else I have on here. I have a lot of data science ones as opposed to Python ones.
Yeah, the one that it seems to be general is codingblocks.net. This one covers like everything.
There's one called the Python podcast.init. But the last time I listened to that, you know how sometimes people's voices just don't jibe with what you're doing? And I had a moment where I kind of wanted to punch the host of this show. He was making my teeth grind, but that I'm very particular. So it may be that, you know, you guys might really enjoy it. This one also seems to be quite focused on, you know, like app logic and business logic and web development sort of stuff. Although here, you know, one of the topics is using deliberate practice to level up your skills, or riding the rising tide of Python. So yeah, so that one is the Python podcast.
I'm checking that out. You might have to share that list. I know.
Yeah, I can share that list later in Slack.
Yeah, definitely. And then I know some already aware, maybe the Python tutor, where you can kind of visually see the code, but it's still not a replacement for using the reactive debug on your IDE, right? Udemy course, the web developer bootcamp, I have not had the time to finish this one. It has like over 200 something videos just for that, but supposedly it covers front, middle, and back end web development. So if you're really interested in doing that, I would check that out. Udemy Complete Python Bootcamp, that one's pretty useful. I think I finished that one actually almost. Automate the boring stuff, and I think we covered that in some of our classes. The only thing I don't like about this book is that it wasn't always accurate. Like there was things in here that were deprecated, right? Because it's already done. They're not using that format anymore. So it's almost like a treasure hunt to try to code with automate the boring stuff, even though there's a lot of very useful scenarios that you can use it for, to automate different things, whether it's documents that you're trying to render, read, write, build, or really like web scraping, and really a lot of different things you can automate besides email and everything. So,
yeah.
And really that's all I have. That was the end of my slide.
Well, thank you so much. There's a lot of great information in there. And I'm sure that attendees have some questions for you. And I can go ahead and allow people to talk if you want to ask your questions out loud, or feel free to ask them in the chat as well.
Hello?
Yep.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh,
there you go.
okay, cool. Okay, so here's my first question. When you realize that the person who's learning is starting to stop or trying to like fade away, it's like, I don't want to do it. I'm starting to get lazy. What would be your approach for them to try to remain on track?
Well, for me, the main piece was I helped them, right? Like really, I had to regularly stay on top of it. I really had to commit 2-3 times a week to make sure that they were showing their code, and I didn't make it forceful. I made it fun, right? So even if we couldn't finish during that 30 minutes, we would follow up on the next time, right? So I didn't force them to just do it. I wanted to customize it based on the individual, because not everybody learns the same way. Like Bethany said, some people pick it up faster than others. Some of them I had to be just be very patient, or if I didn't know something, I would find somebody else. I'm like, hey, Brian, he's one of my team leads, and I'm like, hey, check this out. He has a problem right here. He needs a little bit of help. Or we had different groups of rooms, so we use WebEx Teams for the different rooms for larger groups. So there are different experts and different levels of programming experience, and I would just get them introduced. So some people are just too shy and not too confident to ask questions. So I would say, hey, Jeff, I have another person here. He's working or she's working on this problem. This is the language that he's using, or, you know, this is the project he's working on. Can you help him out? So it's a lot of, you can say, dispatch and at the same time mentoring, or, you know, in every way possible. It's not a straightforward answer, I don't think. Did that help you?
It does. I gotta think about that. The other one is, how would you encourage someone in the management side, or in basically your company, to invest more in the employees so that they have time to investigate, explore the different technologies, different solutions, rather than just say, you know, oh, do it when you get home? Because when you get home, that's a whole different world. Sometimes your mind just shuts down. In other cases, you just have absolutely no time, especially if you have kids. So ideally, you would like to encourage more time to work on exploration and developing skills at work rather than just doing the same manual tasks over and over again, which is insanity. But so how, going back to the original question is, how would you encourage management or your company to invest in their employees to move that direction?
You have to start it. I've actually initially I built my credibility and sharing even before as a manager, right? And what I've been encouraging other managers is to just try and teach themselves, because it's not easy to teach something such as programming. I literally had to get the book, go spend some time myself and learn it, experiment it, and I found a use case. So I'll give you an example. The best way to learn and teach it is find a project. So I had a tool called Teamwork. That was a project management tool. And they had a web API and documentation available. And my goal was, or at least part of my goal was, how do I create projects so that I can speed up the process for project managers in creating the different rooms that they need, right? The different projects with the right owners, the project code, and et cetera, et cetera. But it was experimentation. A lot of it was me being brave. It wasn't easy. I had to cheerfully ask for it and smile quite a bit and find a use case. I started with a small group. It wasn't a large group right away. I basically experimented with my own team first, right? I had my team lead assisting. Some of them had software background already. I had them help me figure out, like, hey, what should we cover for each class? How long should I have this class? So really the first strategy is starting a small group, just like a study group, right? And then start getting it bigger. So I started with just my 10 engineers, and then I started telling my director and say, hey, guess what? I have this group that's studying with me. We're learning Python. I'm teaching them every week, 1 hour. It's not taking a lot of their time. It's just 1 hour before lunch or after lunch that we can regularly meet. And we start from installing Python and saying hello world. And slowly but surely, I started sharing it with the rest of the practices for the data center team, for the secure networks team, and then I expanded it outside of my region. So I was covering Florida. I managed the Florida team. I have 10 engineers now. So I just started sharing it as part of my daily update. I have a biweekly meeting with my peers and my directors. So a lot of it is self-advocating, right? You can't be shy to show something that I think the community is going to benefit. It definitely takes a lot of thick skin and a lot of enthusiasm and positivity. So I also showed them that, hey, guess what? Even in the short time, I was able to use a small script that saved us a few hours in deployment. Typically, they would spend 1 week, and we were able to cut it down into 2 days instead. So typically, they want to look at numbers. So you want to have some data to help sponsor yourself, right? It's much easier to validate the value of how important automation is when they see the results. Especially if you're in a consulting firm, they're always looking at the utilization. So I'm always looking for projects for my engineers to do. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. And also, like you said, I have 4 boys. So I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to not having enough time to do this. I sacrificed quite a bit of my time, not only preparing the material, and that wasn't even easy. As a facilitator, and Bethany knows this very well, finding the material, having the PowerPoint ready, having a repository, having a structure. What I did was I created different folders for different sessions. So I always prepared a PowerPoint with agenda, what I was going to cover, what are the sample codes. I actually had a sample code ready for them to use. So in case they couldn't figure it out, I had one to help them. I also had a separate room in WebEx Teams or whatever collaboration tool that you have. So if they got stuck, other people were helping, right? And another thing that I found that was helpful, especially for newbies, is you can't mix newbies with expert. What I found is that people get a little shy if they get put all in one room and somebody else is very much way above their head, and somebody brand new is asking a question or don't even want to ask because they feel intimidated, right? So it's a lot of experimentation. I always tell my team that you guys are my live experiment. I'm not a standard, you can say, normal manager. I try a lot of things. If something doesn't work, I will try something else. I read a lot of books, especially in leadership. So I think that helps a lot. I'm actually working with our VPs and C levels, especially the HR department, to create an enablement program that helps not only do onboarding for new employees, but also how to create a mentorship style format where you do peer coaching. But again, it starts from an individual, right? It's not easy. You have to be brave to start the initiative. If people see that there's value, they spread it, and it becomes a organically growing process. Changing a culture is not easy. I don't know too many places out there that have a very good culture when it comes to leadership. 9 out of 10, if not 90% of the time, people struggle having good managers. And it's very sad that that's a problem, right? That people are not spending the time that they should. And that's pretty much why I'm talking about this today, is because it's not enough of out there that are leading the way when it comes to being empathetic and understanding the value of spending the time with your employees. I spend a lot of time even one-on-one. I do one-on-one with my engineers every other week. I visit my office. I have 5 different locations in Florida that I visit every 8 weeks, if not every or quarterly, to make sure I have FaceTime with my team because they work remotely, right? But that takes effort. You have to be very open and very creative as a leader. And unfortunately, that's not common. So that's a long answer for that one too.
We have one other question that I apologize. I missed it coming up on the Q&A widget. I'll go ahead and read it out. With technology changing all the time, how do you stay on top of that latest technology? And how do you determine when you should jump on a new technology? And I think that's a huge dilemma. And one of the big complaints that I hear from a lot of my friends in the coding world is, and I'll hear it on one hand with excitement from someone, and on the other hand with snark from someone, which is, oh, that person over there is doing resume-driven development, or that person over there is in love with the latest technology, or a person saying, look, this new technology, as example, Rust. Oh my gosh, Rust looks really cool. And look what Discord did with Rust, and look at how performant they made their code over Go. We should be using Rust. I'm really excited. And you know, how do you discuss those things? Because like you said, especially in large companies, the adoption curve can be like a decade out.
And it's not even that. It's like I think I've seen, even regardless of even the new technology, I think we all suffer from information overload, right? Including new technology overload, the latest and greatest. It's like a squirrel, right? You're finding the best thing, just it's all instant gratification, but not a lot of deep involvement or whatever it is, which in a way you're losing the expertise because you're becoming a master of a lot of things, but not necessarily deep into the different technology, right? My suggestion is you have to match what you like, right? Do something that you love. Just because it's out there doesn't mean it's for you necessarily, or at least it's not the right timing. You need to make sure that you pick your choices. And it's not just programming. I would say my advice is write your goals out, do a vision board even, collaborate with another peer to set your goals so that you can meet it. I have another lady who was studying data science, right? And she had a course and she couldn't maintain a pace. So we decided to do a bi-weekly every Sunday for at least an hour. And she would tell me, okay, she completed this chapter. Now I'm experimenting and trying this. She's a freelance, so she owns her own business. She has two children that she supports. And it's a struggle for her to even plan out 30, 60, 90 days, right? So right now we're in the process. A lot of the people that I support one-on-one, if not in peer support groups, is strategizing. What's the brand that you're trying to build? So I know that we have many different classes that we take. We go to college, we go through the phases, but the number one problem that I see is that people don't know what they want. They don't know the goals that they have in the future in 2 years, 3 years. I would say set short-term goals, even learning, let's say, the next language like Python. Maybe set a timeline where you say, hey, I want to work on a project that consists of Java, CSS, or even Go, right? Or even Ruby, whatever that language is. Make sure that you don't forget to get out of whatever you're doing and plan out what your next few months, the next year, or even 5 years, where do you want to end up? But the most important part is this really something you like? You don't have to be a pure coder to be in this type of field. The common gap that I keep seeing is that people are not really finding the use cases. That's the hardest part. When somebody says, oh, I need this and I need this outcome, it's so much easier for somebody to program something, right? It also motivates you. Like another example I'll give you, one of the two ladies I was working with, they're like, hey, it's really hard for me to start coding and continuously doing because I don't know why I want to code. So I told them like, all right, so what are you working on today? What kind of project are you working on? And I literally had to walk through it and say like, hey, well, looks like there's APIs or web applications out there that you could use for your tool for this project, for your deployment. Why don't we try that out? Check it out. Let's read the API documentation, whatever it is, right? It's a lot of social conversation. I also don't think that anything's permanent. As you mentioned, it's a struggle. I struggle with it myself. And all I could do is really jump for one or the other, but I still pick and choose what I want because we only have, what, 24/7 hours, right? I'm only one person. I can't do everything. I have to chunk my time in 15 minutes increment. That's how I get a lot of things done. A lot of my team laughingly say I'm a time traveler because they don't know how I'm doing all these things, including being on the Women Who Code sessions. They're like, how do you even get to this session? I mean, this is just one of the support groups that I help out. I work with Lean In. I also work with Now. I work with Alpha, Boss Girls. And I'm now added as part of the Women in Technology Committee. I'm also working into the Cisco side, DevNet side. So I get interviewed or do use cases for them as well to do beta testing for their application. It's a lot. So I would say pace yourself. Just know that you only have 24 hours. Make sure you have time for yourself. Make sure you focus on your health and your mental state and physical health, because if you're not healthy, you really can't focus on coding. And nothing worse than you coding and struggling and beating yourself up because you didn't get enough rest or didn't take the breather that you need, but it's 5 minutes or more.
I think that's excellent advice, and I would tag on to the end of that. I'm not going to tell you how ancient I am. I'm not in the okay boomer category, but I'm okay boomer adjacent. And just from the years that I've spent in technology, I liken it to colors and lipstick and makeup trends. Trends come and go, and you have to, however you want to do it. Maybelline had some great suggestions. I do it in my particular way, which is that I have a lot of news feeds that I track, but I often just read headlines. Like for technology news, I just read headlines. And if the headline catches me or the summary catches me, I might save that out into a read later bucket and then try to revisit that periodically. And I try to separate out the things that are like happening in the world of programming or technology from the things that I'm working on right now, either in my job or for my open source projects. And so those might take more special attention. And so for me, it's, setting aside time to kind of go through that news feed a little every day, and then once a week kind of diving a little bit deeper, but also knowing, like I brought up Rust in jest when I first spoke, but Rust does seem to be getting some traction. And so this weekend I did read an article about how Discord replaced their Go code with Rust. And I had in mind, well, I've learned Go. Should I be paying attention to Rust right now? And my assessment is it still feels trendy, and I don't have any projects coming up where I need that kind of performance. So I might put that aside in favor of something else, right? Like maybe learning new Python techniques, because my work right now is more Python focused and more web focused.
Yep.
So, you know, you try to do that and try to say to yourself, trends come and go, and I need to, you know, I need to carve out space for myself to focus on what interests me, focus on the next step in my career path, and pull in, like, try to keep tabs on things to see if they're bubbling up. And balance that, because if you try to go in depth on everything or become an expert on everything, you'll be an expert on nothing and you'll be exhausted. So yeah, kind of a balancing act there.
Yeah, it's like a river. Like I've been telling people, I'm like, you know, just go with the flow sometimes. Don't forget to meditate, don't forget to exercise, eat healthy as much as you can. And unfortunately, the more we age, memory starts to suffer and you don't heal as fast. So I always remind my team, I'm like, it's not just about the smarts. It's also about being smart about your work, right? Life balance. Always focus, okay, what's your goal? What's your priority? If you have a certain lifestyle you're trying to meet, don't forget that part, because you can work your butt off and do a lot of things, but you might not have the outcome or the result that you want. So prioritize on what you truly value, right? Is it something you truly like? Is it something that's going to be a hobby or you love it? Then the more it doesn't feel like you're struggling and trudging through it, right? So always measure your tolerance and your threshold. Is this something you can tolerate, right? Regardless of what kind of job it is. Make sure you measure, listen to your body, listen to your mind and your gut feeling, because that will guide you to what you want to do.
That's the big one. Listen to yourself. Don't, and that's the other piece of, like, the trend thing. You have to be careful of other people telling you what's important. Programming is hard enough, and balancing all of this is hard enough. And so you really want to, as much as possible, be clear on your personal reasons, and those reasons being your reasons and what you want to accomplish, and not what other people tell you you ought to look like, talk like, be like, do projects like. Like, that's about other people, but you need to be about what you want and where your balance is and how you learn and the problems you want to solve. And so that's another way to do it. It's like, is this new technology going to help me solve the problems I want to solve? If not, we put it in the maybe when I have some free time pile.
Yep. Don't be afraid to say no. I mean, I'm going to keep telling everyone this. You can't do everything. Don't be afraid to delegate and share, right? You don't have to take on all the projects or all the tasks. I think that's one of the hardest lessons learned for people that are perfectionists, especially if they like to own something, they don't necessarily want to let it go for somebody else to help out. So try to balance letting go and taking ownership about the projects that you do. Perfectionism only takes you so far, especially when there's a time and money allotted to complete a project, right? And don't forget about your side hobbies. I know we talked about, you know, coding and everything else. I remind people, what is fun for you? Meaning, do you like to do coding, or do you like to dance? Do you like to read a book? Do you like to sing, karaoke, even podcasting? I do that on the side. Try to continue to grow, follow a growth mindset. I mean, additional books that I haven't even listed is Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's very difficult to learn or build a new habit if you don't have a certain mindset, right? Just don't forget that if you fail, it's not a identity. It's not you directly. That's a fault. It's just something that you have room for improvement. So don't take it too personally. Make sure that if you make mistakes, you learn from it, you move forward. Don't take too much time on focusing like you're a failure. That's not effective. It doesn't help anyone or yourself. Just keep moving forward. So I think we have plenty of advice. It was more than just coding. So I'm hoping.
Life advice brought to you by.
I have to keep repeating it only because a lot of people are in toxic places. And I'm glad that you asked about, you know, how do you motivate leaders? And unfortunately, that's the root of the problem, right? How do we get managers to help enable the employees? And if they don't have a good manager that can support that time so they can learn it, it's a struggle. I've had many friends leave the company for this reason, lost a job, even died or got sick because the managers weren't helping their employees. So I take it seriously that we send this message out. It's that important. If you become a manager, it's not just a paycheck. You impact people's lives. And I hope that you all know that if you know what a bad manager is, if you become one, then try not to be one. Okay.
Try very hard. Yes.
Yeah.
So we are about 20 minutes over when we said we were going to stop. So I'll open up to any last questions or comments that people have. And you can always connect to Maybelline or myself or any of the other people here on our Slack channel. And if you don't know about our Slack channel or don't have an invite, message me and I'm happy to add you. And hopefully we'll have another session like this in the future because this was cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great
Thank you
question.
so much, Maybelline.
Thank
Does
you.
anyone have any last questions or comments? All righty. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maybelline, for your time and all of the great advice. And thank you, everyone, for attending.